All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as a preview for the Rankin Technical College AWD1111 database-driven websites class, and also kind of a culmination of what we've had for our other class, which is AWD1000 Web Development Technologies, I've been doing a series of video presentations by some ebooks by a guy I found online named Flavio Copes. And so far, I wanted to do 7 of these, and so far I've got about 5 done. I started with his HTML ebook, went on to his CSS ebook, then to his JavaScript ebook, then to his ES5 to ESNext ebook, and to his React ebook. Now, the React is really all over the place, and I apologize for that. I may go back and redo it. We'll see. But now I'm going to talk about his Node.js ebook, which will leave us just with the Express when we get done. Now, the Node ebook, it is literally, when you take a look at it, let's see, it is 189 pages. So, of course, we won't do this in one video. But we will talk about an introduction to Node. I'm not a big history when it comes to stuff like this. We'll talk about how to install Node, which is unbelievably easy. The JavaScript you need to use Node, differences between Node and the browser, V8, which is the engine that's used to run both Chrome and Node, some Node basics, such as running Node scripts from the command line, exiting Node program, looking at environment variables, talking about REPL, working with the command line, and then talking about Node modules and NPM, which is the Node Package Manager. And we'll actually go in and build a very simple Node application. We'll talk about global packages and local packages. We'll get into talking about the event loop and what that is. And then we go into, that's about the first, 100 pages or so. Then we'll spend a bit of time on this, which are callbacks, promises, async, await, because you can't spend too much time on it. And then the Node event emitter, get into networking and talk about HTTP and the related stuff, the file system stuff, some of the core modules that are in there, and I guess then there's some miscellaneous. Now, Mr. Copes has got the idea, as he says right here, that it follows the 80-20 rule. Learn in 20% of the time, 80% of the topic. That's not the way I was taught it. I was taught learn 20% of the stuff that you'll use 80% of the time, but, to each their own. Now, as mentioned here, it says here, this post is getting started with Node.js server-side JavaScript runtime environment. That's the biggest thing about Node. It allows you to run JavaScript on the server. Not previous to Node, but really previous to Node and some of the other things here. JavaScript was mainly just run on the client. But now it's run on the server. As it says, it's built on top of the Google Chrome V8 JavaScript engine. What basically happened was a gentleman came in, I forget his name, I think it was Roland Dahl, came in and combined the V8 engine that's used to power Chrome, added some C++ to it, and allowed you to use JavaScript to do a lot of things, such as create web servers. So here's the overview. As it says, they'll discuss some of the best features of Node, give an example app, and talk about some of the frameworks and tools. Again, with this overview, Node.js is a runtime environment for JavaScript that runs on the server. Now, Node is used for other things than just creating server-side JavaScript, but that's one of its main, if not its main objective. Notice that it is 12 years old. It's open source, all right, and it's unbelievably popular. All right, and it's being used by virtually anyone and everyone. As it says, it's built on top of the Google Chrome V8 JavaScript engine, mainly used to create web servers, but not limited to that. So the features, it is fast. JavaScript code, as it says right there, running on Node.js can be twice as fast as using compiled languages, and orders of magnitude faster. All right, because as it says, it's got a non-blocking paradigm, which we'll get into. It's simple. Now, that isn't really true. It says extremely simple, actually. To get started, it's pretty simple. That said, one of the reasons it's so nice is the next thing. It runs JavaScript code. There are already millions of people who know JavaScript and have learned it for client-side programming. Well, they can use a lot of that same knowledge and move over to from the front end to the back end using the same programming language, okay? It says in Node.js, the new ECMAScript, if you don't know this, whereas the governing body pretty much for HTML and CSS pretty much is the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium, the governing body for JavaScript is the European Computer Manufacturers Association, or ECMA. In fact, the true name of JavaScript is ECMAScript. All right, we talked a little about V8. As it says, running on the Google V8 JavaScript engine, which is open source, Node.js is able to leverage the work of, to be unbelievably fast. It's asynchronous. In traditional programming languages, all instructions are blocked by default unless you do a lot of extra work to make them work asynchronously. What does that mean? That means, for example, if you've got a C program or a Java program or any of the others that they show there, and it has to go and let's say it has to go and do a database lookup. So maybe it's got to go out to the internet, and then it's got to find the database, and it's got to look it up and maybe run a query, etc. All other instructions in the program typically are blocked by default. In other words, the program just stalls until that is returned. All right. JavaScript, as it says, allows you to create asynchronous and non-blocking code in a fairly simple way. All right. By its very nature, Node.js is single-threaded. You'll read different things, and some people say that's not true, but basically it is. In fact, the single thread that runs is called the UI thread, or the user interface thread. All right. JavaScript uses, or Node.js uses a combination of JavaScript, callback functions, and callback functions can be broken down even into callbacks, promises, and async await, and it uses event-driven programming. So in other words, with event-driven programming, the system sits there and waits for something to happen, and then it reacts to it. As it says here, every time an expensive operation occurs, you pass a callback function, and the callback function is what you want to have happen. It's called once the processing can continue. So what happens is you don't wait for your non-blocking operations to finish before you go on with the rest of the program. Rather, you just go on and you let that do its thing, and then when it's done, you can have a callback function that gets called eventually. Such a mechanism, as it says, derives from the browser. We can't wait until something loads from an AJAX request before being able to interpret click events on the page. It must happen in real time to provide a good experience for the user. And that's an important concept because by and large, end users are fickle and end users are impatient. All right. If you don't give them a good experience, they'll go someplace else to try to find it. As it says, if you've created an on-click handler for a web page, you've already used asynchronous programming techniques with event listers. If you've ever done anything that uses a set timeout or a set interval, you've already written some asynchronous code. As mentioned here, this allows Node.js to handle thousands of concurrent connections with a single server without introducing multiple threads. All right. Node provides non-blocking I/O primitives, and generally Node libraries are written using non-blocking paradigms. So as it says, blocking behavior becomes an exception and not the norm. When Node.js needs to perform an I/O operation such as reading from a network or accessing a database. Rather than blocking the thread, it will simply resume operations when the process comes back. So as mentioned there, it doesn't waste CPU cycles. Now NPM, see if I can open that here. Well, let's see. NPM is the Node Package Manager. Now this is Flavio Cope's thing on NPM. I haven't even seen this before. But if I do go out to npmjs.org, all right, doesn't look like much, but this is the Node Package Manager. So for instance, let's say that I want to search for what we'll talk about in the next series of videos, and that's Express. All right. And you can see there that it says Express is a fast, unopinionated, minimalist web framework. Well, the reason I'm showing you this is if I do go and click on the Express, it'll show me information on Express. All right. And it'll show me how to download it, etc. So there it is. You'll notice the weekly downloads are 10 million. So you've got a great community using this. They show you someplace in here how to install it, and they show you quickly how you can use it. That is actually building a very simple little server. We'll come back to that at a later time. As it says there, it has almost 500,000 open source packages you can freely use. You just have to install them, and it's over 500,000 now. So here's an example of a simple Node application. Now, what happens is, for lack of better words, you get HTTP, which works with the network, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is one of those packages that you get by default here. All right. And I don't want to confuse anyone who might be watching this, but I do want to mention this. So I already showed you that. And let's go and grab this. I'm going to make a copy of it. And I'm going to paste it in, but I'm going to see if I put in HTTP here. All right. So there's HTTP. Okay, it says security holding pattern. I might be at the wrong one. It really and truly doesn't matter. The point is this, that NPM is not where you get HTTP from. If I go into the Node.js HTTP package. All right. So if I go to nodejs.org itself and I go into its documentation, there's the HTTP package. So the stuff you see over here is stuff that you get out of the box, so to speak. So rather than having to install HTTP, all you have to do is bring it into the system by using a require. So there's the require right there. And quite often you give it the same name as what you require. You don't have to do that. You could have called it anything. All right. Here, I don't know why they're doing this because I've never done this in a program, but they're setting up host name. So rather than using 127.0.0.1, okay, they're just calling it host name. You'll notice that the expressive use of constants in here also. Whenever you can, you use constants in here because these aren't going to change. You set your default port to 3000. Then this is creating the server. All right, it says create the server. REQ and RES are the request and the response. We're not doing any request in here for anything, but we are doing response. In response, we're setting the status code to 200, which means success. We're letting the system know that what we want to send back is plain text and just hello world. All right, with a line break after it. Then we go and we listen on this port. Now I'm going to run this. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to use this. Now I've already got Express set up. I've already got Node.js set up on my machine. I'm going to create a new folder that's called, I'm just going to call it Node Example. All right, so I'm going to come in there and let's see, I will come in and I will open up this in Visual Studio Code. And you can call what I'm about to do whatever you want, but I'm just going to create a new file called server.js. And I'm going to paste all that code in. So you already heard what this was about. This again, and I still put in, I'm old-fashioned, I put in these semicolons. All right. But right here, we're including or requiring the HTTP package. We're setting the host name and the port. Here we're creating the server. And here we're telling it to listen for the server. What does that mean? If this works, what we should be able to do is to go out to HTTP, all right, localhost 3000, and if it comes back and it says hello world, it should work. So let me do a file save. All right, and there's two ways that you can actually run this. For whatever reason, I've just always run it by going to git bash here. And doing a CD to node example. Oops. How about a CD to desktop? Alrighty. Well, let's do it this way. It's fine. We'll fix it. All I have to do is come into here, right mouse click, and choose git bash here. And there's my path. Okay. And I'm going to come in here now, and I'm going to type in node server.js. Now I get the message that it's running here. Okay, so I'm gonna grab that. Oops, I don't know why, but I stopped the run. Okay, so it's running now, and I'm going to come up here and open up a browser window and paste that in. And there's my hello world. I have written my first server and my first node application. Now there wasn't much to it, granted, but hopefully at least you're starting to get a feel for how easy this pretty much is. As it says, the code first includes the HTTP module. Node has an amazing standard library. I guess if I'd have come there, I would have found it. The create, then we do another couple of constants. The create server method, as it says, creates an HTTP server and returns it. We set it here to listen on a specific port. And as they mentioned, whenever a new request is received, a request event is called, providing a request object typically called REQ and a response object typically called RES. These two objects, as mentioned there, are essential to handle the HTTP call. The first handles request details, and again, we're not using it. The second is used to return data to the caller, and we are returning three things. The status code of 200, which indicates success. The content type, which says we're returning plain text. All right. And an end response. Okay. Now, just to show you, not a big thing, because I'm just about finished with this first lecture. Yeah, I'm at 18 minutes, but let's just do one last thing quickly. That is, I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to go back into code, and I'm going to change this type from text. I think I'm doing this correctly, but we'll find out, to HTML. And then we're going to change this to an H1. And I'm going to save. All right, now, we haven't talked about this yet, but my changes aren't being shown in here, so I've got to stop my server and start my server up again. And now when I do that, you may or may not be able to tell, but this is now in bold. In fact, if I do a view page source, I thought I could do a view page source in here, and evidently it's not letting me do that. But if I were to successfully do a view page source in here, all right, basically it would show me, it would show the fact that this is bolded. Okay, that's about it for the first lecture. We'll pick it up when I come back again in a couple moments, and we'll start talking about Node.js frameworks and tools. See you then.